Welcome, college football fans, to my 2024 college football playoff preview show. I am so excited to preview the first ever legitimate college football playoffs where every single team, not just an elite few, had a chance. Every team in college football had a path, a chance to get to the playoffs. And now we have 12 teams. This is going to be such an exciting video. This is going to be such an exciting playoffs. The playoffs are going to last all the way until January 20th. So we're going to have so much football, so much meaningful football. The postseason is meaningful once again, and I cannot wait to see how this all works out. I'm going to be presenting my preview and prediction for every single bracket, every single matchup in this bracket, and presenting a national championship prediction. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your predictions. Let me know whether you're a Boise State fan or you're a fan of any one of these teams. This is not just a Boise State specific preview. There will be a preview of Boise State's matchup against SMU or Penn State, whoever they end up playing. Once that is decided, Jake Posey from Master Football will be coming on. We'll be previewing that game in depth. But today, this is a video for all college football fans, Boise State fans, of course, because we're in the bracket. I've made a preview video for almost every single playoff, and in every single video, there's the comment, why are you doing this? Boise State's not in the playoffs. Why is a Boise State fan talking about this? I do that because I'm a fan of all of college football, and I don't just make Boise State content. However, those comments aren't going to be in there today because Boise State is in the playoffs. So Boise State fans, we will of course talk about Boise State's potential matchup, but we'll go much more in depth. And for the rest of these teams, in the actual preview video itself, for whenever we find out who they're playing. For the rest of these teams, we're not going to go super in depth throughout the matchups, including Boise State's. We're going to kind of do more of a surface level. I'll give you kind of why I'm thinking each of these teams are going to advance. There will be some stats, some key players that will be mentioned, but it will be a little bit more surface level because I want to try and keep this video a little bit shorter if possible. All right, so let's start off with the first matchup, the very first matchup in the, again, first ever legitimate college football playoffs, Indiana versus Notre Dame. Indiana checking in at the 10th seed. They were ranked number 8, but they're in the 10th seed the way the format works. Playing off against Notre Dame, who is the higher ranked seed at number 7. So they're going to have to go up and play at Notre Dame, who's ranked at number 5 overall. And this is going to be tough. This is going, the fact that the home field advantage is a factor, is part of the playoff system, is going to be such a massive determiner, I think, in a lot of these games. Now, if we're just talking clear weather, 52 degrees and no rain and no snow, I think Indiana has an advantage in that scenario. I think their offense matches up pretty well against Notre Dame. They have a really strong run defense, the number one run defense in the entire country, 70.8 yards allowed per game rushing. And their passing offense, they do have a rushing offense. They average just over 170 yards per game rushing, but the passing offense is the biggest part of their offense, and they're very strong with it. 2,827 yards passing for Curtis, 27 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, has taken 17 sacks, but he has done some incredible things. Now, they haven't really been tested that much. That has been a factor. But at the same time, neither really has Notre Dame. I mean, when you look at two teams that are very evenly matched, I think Indiana and Notre Dame really do pair up well with each other. Both teams had very easy schedules all the way through. Both of the teams had disappointments. Indiana obviously losing to Ohio State, not Michigan. Obviously losing to Ohio State, which was going to be like their one chance to really prove that they were worthy. Some thought that might knock them out of the playoffs. They got here anyway. But obviously they're coming in with a little bit of disappointment because they did not play up to the stage. And then at the same time, you have Notre Dame, who lost to Northern Illinois, and that was very much of a different circumstance. Indiana coming to a big stage where I don't think people expected them to win and falling short. Notre Dame playing Northern Illinois at home, so home field advantage wasn't a factor in that one, and losing a game that they should not have lost. The fact that they are in the playoffs, I think well, maybe not the fact that they're in the playoffs, but the fact that they're ranked as high as they are in the playoffs, I'll say that, is controversial for sure. I certainly do not think that Notre Dame deserves to be the higher ranked team. I think Indiana, if you're looking just purely at body of work, I think Indiana deserves to be in the higher ranked team in this one. And if it was at Indiana, I think we would have a different result. However, they're playing at Notre Dame. And while that isn't, again, Northern Illinois beat them there, while that isn't by itself a sole factor, they're going to be playing in the snow. I was supposed to make this preview video earlier this week. Going to have a special guest on. It's going to be a very different format. Fortunately, that fell through due to some scheduling issues. Totally fine. But I'm kind of happy that I had to wait a little bit because it's changed my prediction for this bracket. Now that they're going to have to go up and play in the snow, and it doesn't look like it's just going to be a scattering. Looking at the video footage of the snow this morning, there's going to be inclement weather. This is going to be a factor. I think that's going to play a massive role more than the home field advantage. It's not so much the fans in the stands, in this case, the home field element. It's where the game is being played and that favoring Notre Dame in this game because it's going to take away the pass. Not entirely, but it's going to impact it. It's not going to be as effective as it typically is for Indiana. I think that they're going to struggle. I think this game is going to be forced down onto the ground. Now, obviously, Indiana, one of the top run defenses, but Notre Dame has a much better rushing offense than Indiana. Rushing for Notre Dame, they're averaging over 200 yards per game rushing, 224.8 yards rushing. Now, Indiana, they're not shabby in the running game. Again, they're averaging, like I said, 173.6 yards rushing per game, but Notre Dame has a strength there. And when you take out the factor of the passing attack, the main offense, and you make this more of a game of chances, a game of opportunities down into, again, the cold, hard ground, probably slippery, again, probably favoring the run more than anything else. Those kinds of games, the little things, the inches matter so much more. It just that one additional 10 yards of field position one way or the other. And in those types of games, the fan environment, when the playing field is completely leveled, the fan environment becomes a determining factor. And so in that circumstance, I think the home field advantage is going to give Notre Dame the win. I think this is going to be tight. Again, coming into this game, I was picking Indiana until I saw what they were going to be facing weather-wise today. And it wasn't like they were going to blow Notre Dame out. I thought it was going to be a close game, but Indiana, chip on their shoulder. Everyone's counted them out. This is their chance to prove it. They're better rested, versus their back end of their schedule compared to what Notre Dame has played. I think that they were going to win this game, and if they'd won, I thought they had a chance to go. Not build that momentum, go play Georgia. We'll talk about here in a moment, who's got an injured quarterback, and then probably whoever the end result of Boise State, whoever they play game, and there was a really good chance here for Indiana. Unfortunately, I think they're going to stub their toe here and stumble in the first game because of slip on the slippery ice here at Notre Dame and end up falling flat. I think Notre Dame will advance. So I'm not going to score predictions for these. I think there's already too much in the air. I'm going to be getting completely into the realms of theoreticals if I start throwing out score predictions. So just going to say this. I think Notre Dame will win a very, very tight game. I think that this will be some kind of like 10-point spread type of situation. Notre Dame wins it. Now, if the weather clears up, if it's not as bad as we think it is, and Indiana's able to bring their full passing attack to bear, I think they can win this game. But again, situational, I don't think that's going to happen today. All right, moving on to the next game. We've got, I'm trying to do this in as close to order as I can. I believe the next game up is Tennessee versus Ohio State. I might be slightly off the time, but we'll just go with them next. All right, so next game, still in the first play system, not the buys yet. It's got Tennessee versus Ohio State. Now, we talked about Indiana and Notre Dame being matched up pretty well, two teams that have had pretty weak schedules. A lot of people have counted them out playing each other, and it's we'll have to see who ends up being the better team in that circumstance, but we still have questions about them moving forward. Tennessee versus Ohio State, that's not the situation at all. Tennessee versus Ohio State are probably the two best teams playing in the first round of any of the programs that we're going to look at today. As far as just evenly matched programs, both of them in different brackets probably have a chance of making a run all the way to the national championship. But unfortunately, playoffs, that's how it works. The seeding is how it works. And Tennessee and Ohio State are going to have to play each other. Number 7th ranked Tennessee, who's number 9 in the bracket, playing off against number 6 Ohio State, who's 8th in the bracket. This is a 50-50 game. I'll be completely honest. There's a couple games in here that are 50-50. There's others that I'm quite confident on, but this is a 50-50 type of game. Honestly, I think it's going to come down to more of the mindset. I think both of these teams are very strong. I think, honestly, again, 50-50, I think they match up really, really well. I think Ohio State is maybe the slightly stronger team. They crushed Indiana, who is, I think, a good program that would have had a chance of maybe not for the weather to win their game. They played Oregon, number 1 team in the country, super tight, 1-point win loss there. And then they played really well defensively, 144.3 yards passing allowed, only 96.8 yards rushing allowed. And then they got a very solid pass-centric offense, but their running game is definitely a factor as well. Their passing game, like I said, Will Howard, 2,800 plus yards passing. But they have two backs that are close to 800 yards. So I think that this is a very, very strong Ohio State team. However, they do have a negative going against them, and that's Ryan Day. Ryan Day has struggled to win the big games, and that loss to Michigan. Not so much that they lost; it's a rivalry game. You see those things, but it was, of course, we all know what happened with the brawl on the field afterwards. Pepper spray being released, certainly overreaction by the officers. But that was national news, and the way that Ryan Day handled it really shook a lot of people's confidence. I mean, you had people, he's going to the playoffs. He came through the season going to the playoffs, and you got people calling for his job. And there definitely seems to be some rumblings that he has potentially lost the locker room. And I don't think it's clear enough on that sense to be able to definitively say it, but he doesn't seem to have control of this team. Now, I'm not saying that he would have been able to stop what happened, but I mean, he just stood there, just staring. I mean, and his reactions afterwards in the press conferences were not very, did not raise confidence in him. There's a lot of national scrutiny and narrative right now surrounding him as a coach, which I think is just breeds toxicity when you're trying to get a team focused. It just takes away. It's a distraction. And again, when two teams are matched this evenly, any form of weakness is weakness, and it's going to be exploited. And distractions like that could be detrimental, could be the difference in winning or losing this game. And there's just a bitter taste in the fan base's mouth from that last game. So even though this is at home, Tennessee has to go play at Ohio State. Weather, of course, again, will probably be a factor as well. But even though they're playing at home, I think the fan base is going to be a little out of it. I'm not saying completely out of it. Ohio State's a very tough place to play at home. The fan base, I lived in Ohio for 2 years. That's where I played my high school football. So I know that their fans are very, very passionate, but it's just the fan base. The last time they were in that stadium was for the loss to Michigan, and now they're back for a playoff game, and I think it might take a little bit to get rid of those feelings. I mean, if you were there, that's your last memory, and it's still weighing on you, and it's a little hard to focus, both teams and the fan base. Tennessee is a well-balanced team. If Ohio State was playing Indiana, if they were playing Notre Dame, they would win no matter what, even with the stuff, the off-field stuff that's going on, in the locker room type stuff going on. But against a team as balanced, as strong as Tennessee, where it's a game of inches, like I said about Notre Dame versus Indiana, game of inches in this one too. And I think that Tennessee, who is a little bit of a more balanced team, Ohio State pass heavy, solid run game, but certainly pass heavy. Tennessee is a little bit more balanced. They got a 2,500 yard passing quarterback. They also have a running back with over 1,400 yards rushing. So they have two really strong number one guys there that can both take over if one element is not doing quite as well. I think it's a little bit of a different animal than Ohio State has faced. They faced some good teams. Like Oregon is the best team in the country and the number one spot there, and they played them well. So they can definitely handle Tennessee. But I think the cold will be a factor here. The more balanced offense of Tennessee, I think, will benefit in that system where they can lean a little bit more heavier into that run. And again, the energy in the fan base for Tennessee, we're talking about energy. I think at the end of the day, this might just come down to the mood surrounding these programs, the energy surrounding these programs and what they're able to build off of. And the energy in Tennessee right now is a lot of excitement. There's a lot of excitement that Tennessee is back. The last 3 seasons for Tennessee, compared to what they had done in the last 15, 20 or so, it's incredible. It really is. I mean, 2007 was the last time this team had a 10-win season up until 2 years ago. And then new coach comes in, 11-win season, 9-win season last year, not where they wanted, but still better than what they'd put up, consistently for the last decade before, and then a 10-win season this year, and they're in the playoffs. I think there is that feeling that Tennessee is back in the top ranks in the blue bloods of college football, and it just seems like there's energy going in different ways, and I'm not trying to get all mysticism here and say that games come down to energy, but I think when you're looking at factors, individual factors, when two teams are matched up so well against each other, the home field would be a factor for Ohio State. But if they were coming off of a win versus Michigan, even if there were questions surrounding Ryan Day, they'd come off of a win. Or if they'd lost, but he'd handle that better. I think that is going to be a factor. I think these are two very good teams. I think Ohio State is a slightly stronger team, but with the likely weather here, I think Tennessee's offense will fare a little bit better, similar to what we were talking about with Notre Dame and Indiana. And I think that there will be a little bit more of a positive push from what Tennessee is experiencing from their fan base and from just the narrative around that program to compare to what Ohio State is facing. So I'm going to say Tennessee wins this game, but if Ohio State wins this one, I will not be surprised at all. I definitely could see them doing it. They come in with the right focus, right mentality. Ryan Day is able to live up to the moment. I think that they can win this, but there's just a lot of questions swirling around that program right now, and that's the last thing you want when you're having to play in the playoffs. All right, so the next game up here, let's look at Clemson versus Texas. This is not such a hard one to preview. Clemson versus Texas. Clemson's just happy to be here. They were not supposed to be here based on what happened this season. They open up, they get blown out by Georgia, and then they lose 2 more games, and including versus their rival South Carolina, and then they end up in their championship game because of a fluke. I mean, it truly was a fluke the way that they ended up there. I believe was it Miami? I think Miami lost, and they were able to advance. And so Clemson is in a place that nobody. If you told a Clemson fan after that South Carolina loss, and I watch a couple of Clemson channels that are very, very good, including Clemson Football Live. I think he does really, really great stuff. I'm going to put a link to the description because you guys should check it out, especially if you're Clemson fans. My wife is a Clemson fan, just as a note here. So I've watched every Clemson game this season, and I've watched most of his videos as well. But Clemson was not supposed to be here. If you asked any Clemson fan, if you asked my wife after the South Carolina game, their season was over. And there are still calls among some fans, not my wife, but some fans to have Dabo Swinney fired. The level of what Clemson has been achieving recently certainly is not what Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson and some of these other greats for Clemson established at this program, and the quarterback play is definitely not living up to some of those great players for Clemson. So there's a lot of questions. I mean, not just Dabo, and I think Garrett Riley has probably been the main focus of most of the Clemson fan base's ire in his offensive system. So again, this is a team that's just happy to be here, and then they ended up winning in their conference championship game on a last-second field goal. If you've watched Clemson play, they can't kick field goals. I mean, they've had field goals blocked, they've missed them in big moments. They can't kick field goals, and they nailed a 50-plus yard field goal to win the game and advance to the playoffs. But now they have to play Texas. This is not a good situation for Clemson. They are the number 12 seed, so they had to play the 5th highest ranked team after the conference champions. The top 4 conference champions were selected. This is the spot that most people thought Boise would be in. That the group that the sacrificial lambs, as Paul Feinbaum liked to say about the group of 5. This was supposed to be the quote unquote group of 5 slot for anybody that didn't actually read the rules and also didn't think that a group of 5 team could be ranked inside of the top 10 and outrank outrank 2 Power 4 programs. However, this is the hardest game for any program. Just factually, the way the brackets are set up, this is the hardest game for any program, and it's a Clemson team that shouldn't be here. Again, I don't want to rag on Clemson, and my wife's going to watch this video, and I don't want to rag on our team, but every Clemson fan will tell you that they will be beyond shocked if Clemson wins this game. It's obviously a good Texas program. There have been some inconsistencies at the quarterback position. Quinn Ewers has been banged up. He's still played well. I mean, over 2,600 yards passing, 25 touchdowns. Manning in a fill-in role, and also just kind of they've had some positional plays for him. He's played well as well. Almost 1,000 yards passing for Manning, but there's definitely some questions swirling around a little bit. Not so much of a quarterback controversy per se, because Ewers is the starter, but maybe from the fan base, a little bit of a push for controversy. They want to see Manning out there, and they will see him next year. But the quarterback play has been somewhat inconsistent throughout the season. Again, they've played well, but they've struggled against bad teams. They struggled versus Vanderbilt, Arkansas. They got beat up by Georgia. Texas, it really hasn't been that impressive this season. They've won the games they need to win, but they haven't done it impressively, and certainly I don't think have sowed confidence. The fact that you've got a little bit of a quarterback controversy brewing shows that there are some questions there. Meanwhile, again, I don't think we need to delve too much into Clemson. Again, losses to Georgia, Louisville, South Carolina. They struggled versus Florida State, Virginia Tech, and Pitt. All those teams not finished the season great. Squeaked in the last second field goal versus SMU. The quarterback play is erratic. The running back game has not been as reliable as it was when Shipley was there. Amafa has played okay. He's played well, honestly, but he hasn't been that like home run hit that Shipley was. Only 8 touchdowns on the year, 1,100 rushing, but only 8 touchdowns for Mafa. He's had 5 games of under a 70 yards rushing, so he's eaten when he needs to eat, but then he just hasn't been consistent for them, and he only had 28 yards, 2.2 yard per average. 2.2 yard per average carry versus SMU. I think that Klubnik, he plays well in the big games, but he's weak in some of the completion percentage and his ability. He struggles a little bit when the game is on the line. I think that's not so much the completion percentage. That's not really what I was saying, but in the big moments, he has had some big games, but he has struggled in the big moments. 3,303 yards passing, 33 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. But he's had 20 sacks. Offensive line is a real issue here. I think they're going to struggle versus Texas. And Klubnik has been responsible for some of these losses in the big moments. I mean, versus South Carolina, just a bad decision. He should have thrown the ball away or maybe taken off and ran it, and throws the ball right into the hands of, I believe it was a linebacker, intercepted. Garrett Riley's offense is extremely questionable. I would honestly be surprised if he stayed on. I mean, he doesn't love to fire people, so maybe he'll give him that grace and allow him to stay on for one more season. But I think that Clemson is going to lose in this game. I think they're going to lose pretty handily, honestly. I think Texas is going to win this game by maybe 3 scores. It's a tough one. It's a tough opening match. Congratulations, Clemson, on making it here. It's fantastic just to be here. Hope you enjoy the playoff experience for this game. But I don't think it's going to be much of a surprise. I don't think anybody's going to be shocked. Maybe there's some controversy with my previous picks. I don't think there's going to be controversy in this one. I think that Texas is going to advance. And then finally here, before we get to the second round here with the byes, we have SMU versus Penn State. Now, for Boise State fans, I'm sure you've just been going, yada, 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 come on, get to this one. This is the game that we care about. This is the matchup that Boise State fans are going to be impacted by. One of these two teams are going to go and play in the Fiesta Bowl, where Boise State is waiting for them. And who do we think is going to win this game? Again, if you haven't commented yet, please do. I want to read your comments. Let me know who you think are going to win these games, especially this one. Who do you think Boise State is going to play? And then throughout the rest of this bracket, give me those picks as well if you want to. But if you haven't commented at all and you're like, oh man, I don't want to type out my entire bracket, type out this one. I want to know your thoughts and your predictions, because honestly, both these teams have a chance. It is at Penn State, and again, I said that the format, playing at home for the highest ranked team, that's a great element. I love that. It brings the pageantry of college football, which is so much about that home field, that home fan element, into the college football playoffs. I love that. But it also means that it does give a massive advantage to whatever team gets that highest ranked spot, especially when you're playing at Penn State. I mean, you ask anybody out there that has played at Penn State, they will tell you it is one of the toughest environments. The whiteout, it's going to be this is one of the toughest environments in all of college football. It really is. Whether Penn State is good or bad, the players will tell you, I've watched documentaries on it, this is one of the toughest places to play in all of college football. And SMU is a good program. I really think that. I think they have a very exciting offense. Their losses are to good teams. You know, they lost to BYU, who's 10-2, going to go play Deion Sanders' Colorado program, and then they lost to Clemson, who not necessarily like a great team, but they're solid. They're good. They're in the playoffs. They had 10 wins. I was down on them a little bit because I don't think they're going to win, but they've had a solid year, even if it hasn't lived up to expectations of the Clemson fan base. And those were SMU's 2 losses. They had close games versus Nevada, Duke, Pitt, and BC, which you don't love to see, especially Nevada. But first game of the season, they fired the quarterback after that, swapped him around, and the next guy coming in, a starter after the Nevada game, has been completely different. Kevin Jennings has been incredible. For SMU. 3,000 plus yards passing, 22 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, only 11 sacks. So 3,000 plus yards passing and only 11 sacks. That's incredible. He also has almost 400 yards rushing and 5 touchdowns. And it's not just Jennings though. I mean, this isn't just a one-horse pony. Pony Express for SMU, but it's just a one-horse pony because they have a great running back here in Smith, over 1,200 yards rushing for him, 14 touchdowns. They also have a very deep wide receiver core. This is a dangerous team. This is a really dangerous team, and anybody counting them out, they can win this thing. However, If it was at Penn State, sorry, if it was at SMU, I think SMU probably would win. But it's at Penn State, and this is a good Penn State team. This really is. Now, I do think that they have been unimpressive this season for as high as they are ranked. Not impressive in this grand scheme of college football. This is a good team that SMU is facing. But when you're talking about teams that are ranked is number 4, so yes, they are 6th overall in the bracket, but they're top 5 team. They haven't played like a top 5 team all season. They've been extremely unimpressive in that element. They 7-point win versus Bowling Green, a 14-point win versus Illinois, 3-point overtime win versus USC there towards the end of the season, and a 1-point win versus Minnesota. They start slow and they play down to their competition. So it's not so much, again, that they don't have the capability. I think they do, but they just don't start the way they should, and they are not showing that full capability every time that they play, especially against some of these programs that they kind of overlook. And it's a playoff game, so you don't think you'd be overlooking that, and it is at home, but it's SMU. I mean, if there's a team on here in this entire first bracket to overlook, SMU has overlooked potential. A first-year Power 4 program out of the American Athletic Conference bought their way into the ACC, and this could be a team. I mean, they played in the ACC, right? It's an ACC team. There's not a lot of respect for the ACC in the Big Ten world. Penn State could potentially overlook them, and they cannot do that because SMU is very, very dangerous. But I think that the cold weather will be a massive factor in limiting the effect. Again, most of these home games, they're all north. I mean, almost all of them, right? It's Ohio, all of them. I guess except for Texas. So all of the games except for Texas, they are all in the northern part of the country, and it is going to be very, very cold, and most of these games are going to be snowy, and I think that's going to be a major factor. I really do. When you look at this first round of the playoffs, the biggest determiner, at least with the exception of Texas versus Clemson, is just a better team versus a Clemson team that's not that great this year, but the biggest determinant in all these other matchups, I think, is going to be the weather. And I think that SMU, they do have a strong running game, so it's not like they're going to be counted out, but the quickness of the offense, I think, is going to be mitigated a little bit. And the passing game, which is their bread and butter, that is their focus, over 3,000 yards passing, that is their focus, is going to be reduced. I think that is going to be limited in its effectiveness. I think the cold weather, again, is going to force this into more of a ground game. Now, SMU's good against the ground, 93.4 yards rushing allowed, but Penn State has 800-plus yards back. They've averaged over 202 yards rushing per game. They're at home, and there is a roster mismatch here. There's a lot more depth. When you talk about ground and pound, you smacking into each other type situations, the depth is going to be a big factor. SMU is a first-year Power 4 program. They just don't have that same depth that Penn State has. And I think that Penn State is going to win this game. But I would not be surprised if this is within 14 points. And SMU, especially if the weather's not as big a factor as I'm thinking it's going to be, I think could win this game. But I'm going to predict Penn State. So for anybody not keeping track, that is going to be having Arizona State, who's the first team in the bye, versus in the Peach Bowl, facing off against Texas. Then the Rose Bowl, you'll have Oregon, who is going to be facing off against Tennessee. And then the Fiesta, you'll have Boise State versus Penn State. And then the Sugar Bowl, number 2, Georgia versus number 10, Notre Dame. Now, before we get into the second part of this video, I did want to pause real quick. You may have noticed in the back here, this football, and I'm not a huge Dallas Cowboys fan. However, the reason that this football is here is because I was actually reached out to by Nico Sports, and they asked me if I would be willing to promote a football that they are making for the college football playoffs for the fans. It's an incredible gift. It really is. I mean, you can look at this. You can see the quality on this item. And again, I'm not a huge Dallas fan, but I figured, you know what, I might as well pick Ashigenti's future home here since they were offering me a football to demonstrate, and the CFP ones won't be ready until after the matchups. And so definitely check them out. You can check the image on the screen. It's going to be, I think, a really fantastic product, fully embossed. And if you use Blameyer CFP, you can get $10 taken off of your order. So definitely look into them. Fantastic product. And I'm really excited to be able to partner with them in this. Not just because it's my first partnership, and I'm excited for that. But because it is actually a genuinely really strong, solid product. You can see the size. It's a real football. And I mean, I was surprised actually when I pulled this out of the box just how nice this actually was. So definitely make sure you check it out. And thanks again, Nico, for partnering with me for this video. All right, so getting into the rest of this preview, we have the Peach Bowl. We'll just go chronologically top to bottom here. Peach Bowl is going to be number 14, Arizona State, taking on number 5, Texas. That's who I'm predicting, and I think most people are going to predict that. Again, I don't think I'm going to cause too much controversy with that one. Now, who's going to win this matchup? This is going to be a tough one, honestly. I mean, Texas obviously coming in number 3 program ranked. They're extremely strong, and they're coming out of the SEC. They have played really, really well this season, but Arizona State's going to be ready for them. Arizona State is definitely going to be ready. They're going to be rested. They'll have the film from the game versus Clemson. They'll have a little bit more card. I mean, obviously, you've played so many games. Arizona State was in their championship game, as was Texas. So both these teams already played 13 games coming through into the playoffs. So it's not like there's a lot of stuff that's hidden that the team doesn't know. But the benefit of the rest will help Arizona State. And having some recent film, we haven't seen Arizona State for a few weeks now. They've seen Texas a week ago, basically, by the time that this game is played. So there is going to be a little bit of an advantage there for every team that's in this bye-week format for the quarterfinals. So this is going to be a very interesting game. Obviously, Arizona State has a very, very good running back in Scadaboo. He claims he's the best running back in the country. I will say there is something that we like to call the Jeanty curse. It's that the moment that you compare yourself to Ash Jeanty, typically the next game or the rest of that season, you don't end up doing so well. Just ask San Diego State's running back or ask the Oregon State running backs. Even though it wasn't them, it was a delusional fan for Oregon State that said it, but definitely got a lot of notoriety on that one. However, he's not the best running back in the country, and that was quite clearly proven in the awards given away, but he was on some of those Heisman ballots because he is a good running back. He's not the best, but he's best in the Big 12, and he is an extremely talented running back. 1,568 yards rushing, 19 touchdowns, 6-yard average. He can also catch. It's not his number one asset, but he is definitely a man of many trades here. Versus Iowa State, he had 38 yards receiving and a touchdown. He also had 170 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. So total there of 208 yards combined offense and 3 touchdowns. He was the main reason that they won that game versus Iowa State. And he's made some big statements, and he's going to have to go prove them. And he's going to want to prove them, and that will be a major factor. This is Arizona State's chance to prove themselves. This is a team that was counted out, that thought they should have had a higher seed. Now they're thankful to be in the top 4 here. If Clemson had lost their game, they would not be sitting in the top 4. SMU would be sitting in the top 4 right now, and Arizona State would have to go play Texas, which would have been certainly a very interesting first-round matchup. However, they definitely think that they should have been ranked higher. There's a big chip on their shoulder in that element. They're that underdog, probably the underdog besides Boise State in this entire series. And you could even argue that they're a bigger underdog than Boise State based on rankings and how their season's gone. I mean, it hasn't been great overall. They lost games to Texas Tech and Cincinnati, and they opened up the season 5-2. However, after that, they reversed things. They went 6-0, wins versus Kansas State, BYU, Iowa State. They certainly deserve to be here. If they don't deserve to be ranked above Boise State, and they're not, but they certainly deserve to be here. And they're going to play very, very well. And it's a chance right now for the Big 12 to get revenge versus Texas. I mean, you're going to have all of that momentum pushing you from your entire conference. I mean, obviously, each of these teams will have their conferences behind them, but this is a little bit more meaningful. Texas left the Big 12 because they were too good for that conference. Arizona State has been told that they aren't worthy, that they aren't deserving, that they aren't good enough for most of the season. And so there's a lot of things going for Arizona State in this one, in addition to the bye week. But it's a well-rested Texas team. Yeah, they play that first week versus Clemson, but that's really a tune-up game for them. They're not going to have to pull out all the stops to beat Clemson. They might even get to rest their starters by the fourth quarter. It's a well-rested, energized team after a big win in the first round of the playoffs. tuned up versus Clemson. Texas's defense is something that Arizona State's seen nothing like all season. 143.1 yards passing allowed, 106.4 yards rushing allowed. And there are some other teams Arizona State has played that have slightly better numbers, but I mean, those numbers are against SEC offenses. This is a very good. We talked about it before. There's some inconsistencies there, but it's one of the top teams in the country. This is one of the favorites coming into the season, and now throughout the rest of this season, now into the playoffs, one of the favorites to win the playoffs. Arizona State is going to have to put up everything they've got, and they're going to need a little bit of CFP magic, underdog magic to win this one. Now, I'm rooting for them. I want Arizona State to win this game. I'd love to see them advance, even though there was some chippiness back and forth between Big 12 and Boise State and that stuff. But I like the underdog. I love what I see out of Scadaboo. He reminds me of some other great running backs there that I think had success in the next level, and I think he will have success at the next level. And so I'm excited by what they bring to the table. I think they could win this game, but Texas, I think, is going to benefit from playing Clemson. I think that's actually going to be a positive for them that will get them better prepared for this one. Now, if that game versus Clemson is a dogfight and they barely squeak out of there with a field goal or a touchdown, I mean, Arizona State can win this game. But if Texas gets through with a good tune-up game, and now they come in roaring into this game with all that energy, momentum, and Texas fans will travel well as additionally, I think you're going to see a Texas team that handles Arizona State and wins this one to advance to the next round. All right, so the next game in the series, let's just kind of again going top to bottom here. It's going to be Oregon versus, I'm predicting, Tennessee. Could be either one. I said this one was 50-50. Would not be shocked to see Ohio State. I think that Oregon would prefer to see Ohio State. They've already beat them. They know how to beat them. Tennessee is a little bit of a different animal. Again, I think Oregon is the better team. They are the only complete team in this playoffs. Their offensive line has gotten significantly better as the season went on. They allowed 4 sacks versus Boise State, but on the entire season, they've only had 13 sacks. Gabriel has been incredible. I mean, he's not been Bo Nix, but his skill set combined with the system that Oregon has have worked really, really well together. 3,500 plus yards passing, 28 touchdowns, also has 192 yards rushing and 7 touchdowns on the ground. That's been an element that we didn't really see on the front end of the season, but has been incorporated as we have gone through the year. So I think that Gabriel, he's going to be the biggest playmaker in this tournament besides Ashton Genty, but one of the biggest playmakers in this tournament as far as determining the outcomes of these games. They have incredible wide receivers, very, very deep wide receiver core. They have 4 wide receivers / tight ends with over 500 yards receiving. Their top wide receiver, James, has over 1,200 yards receiving, 5.5 yard average, 37.9 points per game. Defensively, they've been okay. I mean, that has been like their focus per se. But they've been really good overall against the pass. 175.7 yards allowed per pass and 126.1 yards allowed rushing. They've had some close games, but it's kind of taught them how to finish. They've had to go through that adversity, and they've been able to finish strong. Close games versus Boise State, who they only beat by a field goal. As we mentioned before, Ohio State, who they beat by 1 point there. Wisconsin, Penn State, all those games were close, and Oregon had to find a way to grit it out and win. And I think they're ready for this Tennessee team. I'm not going to go too in-depth into this. I think Tennessee is definitely a challenge, but I think they're going to come in beat up. That's the biggest factor. If Tennessee plays Ohio State right off the bat, I think Tennessee can beat them. But that game versus Ohio State is going to be one of the toughest games in the first round. Like I said at the beginning, 2 of the closest match teams. Oregon has the bye and all the advantages that come with that. It's also kind of a home game for Oregon. I mean, this is the Rose Bowl. This is not a long trek for Oregon. They are going to pack that thing out. Tennessee fans, after already paying for tickets versus Ohio State, they're going to have to fly across the country to the Rose Bowl. There will be Tennessee fans. They'll travel well, but I mean, that is going to be a home game. There's a reason the Rose Bowl has been between Pac-12 and Big Ten teams, because they're both right there. That's not the case in this one. Oregon is going to have a much stronger home field advantage. They're both very good programs. They match up well against each other. We talked about all the things Tennessee brings to the table, but it's a home field sort of for Oregon, and it's a well-rested Oregon versus a beat-up Tennessee coming to this one. I'm going to give the nod to Oregon, but this could be one of the closest games that they play in this bracket for them, and this is going to be tough. Tennessee could, like I've said this several times, it's the playoffs. Everybody deserves to be here, right? Everybody is one of the best teams in the country. Anybody could beat anybody. Tennessee could beat Oregon, but I think Oregon has the advantages in this game. I think they will win this one. All right. And then I want to end on Boise State for the quarterfinals. So we're going to go Georgia, Notre Dame, a little bit out of order. I do apologize, Boise State fans watching. But we're going to go Sugar Bowl real quick here. I am taking a little bit longer each of these than I intended to. That typically happens in my videos. Real quick here, Sugar Bowl, Georgia versus Notre Dame. Again, initially, when I was going to make this video, before I knew what the weather was going to be like, I thought Indiana was going to win that game. If Indiana was playing Georgia, Indiana wins. Georgia is not the same Georgia team that we saw all season. Carson Beck, their entire offense. I'm not kidding. Carson Beck is their entire offense. He's thrown for 3,400 plus yards passing, 28 touchdowns. They have only averaged 129.2 yards rushing per game. He is their entire offense, and he's out. He's gone. They have really nobody else outside of him. Their leading rusher has 634 yards rushing, and it's not like it's a double-headed machine like we were talking about with Penn State. Their next leading rusher has 571. I mean, those numbers are not strong. He is their offense. The offense is geared around the passing game. I know there's a lot of hope and excitement about Gunner. I know there's excitement about him, but he's untested, and this is the playoffs. And unless they have a Ohio State 2014 type miracle sitting on the bench, which doesn't happen typically, this is going to be a loss for them. If they were playing Indiana, if they were playing a good team, and I think Indiana is a good team, an untested team, but a good one. Notre Dame, I do not believe they are a good team. I think Notre Dame is the most overrated program in this bracket. I think they are the most overrated team in the country. Do they deserve to be in the playoffs? I think barely. I think they should be in maybe the 12th spot. I mean, maybe that's a little too extreme, but they should barely be in this bracket. The fact they are ranked as high as they are is media garbage. That is just complete bias, nod to the blue blood of what Notre Dame is. They lost to Northern Illinois, and they did not beat anybody else of value of that equaled how terrible that loss was. They had some decent wins, but that loss was down here, and they had nothing that equaled it. And it's not just that. Notre Dame just hasn't played extremely well this season. They really haven't. Notre Dame this year, they have been very, very unimpressive in their wins. They beat an 8-4 Texas A&M team. They beat an Army program that had the easiest schedule in the country and lost to Navy. They beat Navy, finished 9-3. This is just not a good program. They were only up 3-14 at halftime versus Miami, Ohio, the week after Northern Illinois. So it's not like they got woken up and it was like, okay, that was a fluke. They almost did it again versus Miami, Ohio. They were able to finish that game out, but this is not a good Notre Dame team. Again, if it's Indiana with all the weaknesses that Georgia's experiencing, I think that Indiana can pull off a win. It's not going to be like they're going to blow them out. If Indiana plays Georgia, though, I do think they will win that game. But I'm not predicting they will. I think the snow, not Notre Dame, but the snow is going to cut Indiana down. And Notre Dame is going to come play Georgia. Georgia will figure out enough. They will figure out enough offensively to beat a very, very overrated Notre Dame team who's coming off of a very tough game versus Indiana in the first game, the snow game, coming in beat up versus a Georgia team with a bye. They've had enough time to break in Gunner enough. I think Georgia's defense, which has been pretty good overall, 208.7 yards passing. They're definitely vulnerable versus the pass, but Notre Dame has been inconsistent in the passing game, so I don't think that's too much of a concern. And only 127.8 yards rushing per game. And Notre Dame can beat you on the ground, but I don't think they're going to beat Georgia. Again, different-headed machine in the SEC. I think that Georgia is going to win this game in advance. So, who will they be playing? That's the most important question here. Boise State or Penn State? This doesn't really matter who Boise State plays, in my opinion. I don't think it matters who they play. They're going to win this game. And I'm going to do a preview with more in-depth analysis depending on who they play. And I might change my mind depending on the results of the SMU-Penn State game. I'm more scared of SMU than I am against Penn State. I think Penn State has been somewhat unimpressive, again, for where they're ranked. Not necessarily in the college football world, but where they're ranked. I think Boise State can beat them. I'm a little bit more scared of SMU's offense. I think it matches up better against Boise State's weaknesses there in the secondary. Not that Penn State can't pass, but the style of offense from SMU, I think, matches up better against Boise State's weaknesses. But again, I don't think it matters because Boise State is going to win this game. And they're going to win this game because of a few factors. First off, this is, as far as a team perspective goes, this is the healthiest that Boise State has been really all season. Maybe the first game versus Georgia Southern, but really all season. The offensive line, fully healthy. First time since Georgia Southern. And they've had a tune-up game, a couple of tune-up games now, to get themselves back into rhythm. I don't think they're going to be as rusty as they looked in maybe the couple of games leading up to Oregon, the Mountain West Championship game there, Oregon State, UNLV. I think that they're going to be much stronger. And Ashton Jeanty didn't win the Heisman, and that was the worst thing to happen to SMU or Penn State. He said that added fuel to his fire, and asked that, he said 100%. He is going to be angry. He is going to have one of the biggest games of the season on the biggest stage. He lives for the limelight, and he's going to rise to that level. But at the same time, this offensive line that's finally back together, that has lost time to make up for, they are going to be angry. I'm more scared of what the offensive line is going to do than what Ashton Jeanty is going to do. The two of those together are going to be an unstoppable force. They could play anybody in this system in that first game, and I think that they would beat them. Boise State's offense is going to be terrifying, that run game. The passing game, it's been getting better throughout the season. I think it's the most in tune that it's been all year. I think what we've seen in the first halves of these games is more reflective of the potential of a full game in the playoffs than what we've seen in the second half, where Boise State has typically had a lead, and we've seen them kind of revert to just kind of a grind out the clock, and then the passing game struggles because of that, because it's now no longer in tune. But in the first half, that is more reflective of the potential of this passing game than what we've seen in the second half. And Boise State's passing games looked really, really good in the first half. I think that's what you're going to see for this entire game, assuming it's close. I mean, unless they blow them out in the first half, and then you'll see the typical slow, troubling passing game because they're just running the ball every time. But I don't think that's going to happen. So I think you're going to see a very strong passing game behind one of the strongest rushing performances Boise State's put up this entire season. Madsen's extremely confident, especially after getting the 100% nod of approval. He had it all year from the coaches, but with Malachi Nelson transferring out, that is a clear message that he is their guy, not just for this season, but next season. I think he's going to reward that confidence and play confident. He hasn't played loose all season. He's played a little bit like he's trying to, overcome something, not like an injury, but like a little bit of like he's trying to earn his spot. He's trying to, whereas last year when he was playing, he didn't have to. He wasn't trying to earn his spot. Taylor Green was the starter, and he was just playing the time that he had. He had nothing to prove, and he played well. Well, now he has nothing to prove now. He's the starter. Nothing, no matter what happens, he's going to be the starter next year. And so I think you're going to see the loosest, freest Maddox Madsen that we've seen all year combined behind that offense. Again, defense fully healthy. Secondary, if they play like they did versus UNLV, they could win this entire thing. I don't know if that was a huge switch from what we've seen all year. So it's going to be tough to see if they can continue. It's going to be interesting to see if they can continue it into this game and show that the secondary has made the biggest reversal of any single unit across college football, really, but especially at Boise State. So I'm not 100% convinced that what we saw versus UNLV is indicative that they have turned the corner in every element, but that should give fans a little bit more confidence and hope coming into this game that the secondary is going to be a bigger role in this defense. But team aside, the team is good. The team is going to be very hard to beat. Team aside, this game has so much meaning and emotion. This is the Fiesta Bowl. Boise State has won this game 3 times. This is where all the biggest moments, any of these players, if they knew about Boise State growing up, they knew about these games. Having come to the program, they have heard about these games. Every single one of these players, for either their whole life if they were Boise State fans coming in, or at the very least, their entire playing career, have heard about the Fiesta Bowl. This is the biggest game in Boise State history. It's the playoffs. I mean, the fact that they're here, that's so incredible that college football has finally, I can't believe it took this long, but they finally reached a point where Boise State is in the playoffs, and what that means for each and every one of these players who, when they signed, some of them, when they signed Boise State, that wasn't in the offing. They didn't know that was coming, especially these seniors on this team. They didn't know that was going to be something they could legitimately play for, and they're here. And so the emotions of being in the playoffs, the emotions of being at the Fiesta Bowl. I mean, again, if this was them playing in the Orange Bowl or the Rose Bowl or something else like that, it would be important. It would be meaningful, but not as meaningful as playing here. That's going to be a very rested Boise State team. That, again, healthiest they've been all year. They haven't played since the Mountain West Championship game versus a SMU Penn State that I think is going to come and beat up. And this is going to be a home environment. Boise State fans are going to, they've already sold out their ticket allotment. They're going to come in force because, again, everything that this means for them, the fact that they only have to focus on this game to start. And I think there's a feeling that it's just kind of give it all in this one game. And I think Boise State can advance, but and we hope that they can, but the fans are, this is the game we've been looking forward to all season. And we can't wait to see them in the semifinals and the national championship if that happens. But this has been the focus all year, and it's lived up to it. And I think people, as this team went through, they've started putting that money aside. And from every single Boise State source that you can find, this is going to be a massive home field-like environment for Boise State fans. They travel well in general. They're going to travel well to this one. Penn State fans less of them will come because it's obviously it's about equal distance for Boise State and Penn State, but they'll have had to already pay for the first round, and now they got to turn things around real quick right after Christmas and go to this one. Boise State fans are going to sell this out, and that is going to be a massive environment. Bronco Nation, you are going to have a massive role in the results of this game. And so, again, I don't really think it matters who they play, Penn State or SMU. I do think that that both are beatable. I think Penn State is a little bit of a better matchup. As far as Boise State's defense brings to the table, a little bit more of a balanced attack overall there from Penn State, but overall, I mean, it really doesn't matter because of all the other factors. Boise State is going to win this game because neither of these teams are world beaters. SMU or Penn State, neither of these teams are. Tennessee or Ohio State would scare me. Texas obviously would scare me. A lot of these other teams would scare me. SMU and Penn State don't scare me. Boise State can beat either of those programs. Penn State is not a top 5 team. They shouldn't be. Top 10 maybe, but they're a lot closer to Boise State than some of these other top 5 teams. But they will bring the top 5 team brand and the national attention. So I would prefer it to be SMU. Sorry, I would prefer it to be Penn State. I am less scared by them than SMU's offense. And I think it brings a little bit of a better national spotlight because Boise State is going to win this game. Just every single sign points to this being a win from the team to the environment, and we'll go a little bit more in depth into that. I know that's a little bit more very, very surface level, leaning into Homer territory, which I promise that's not. If anybody's watched my channel before, you know I try to be as analytical as I possibly can while wearing the blue and orange, as unbiased and logical as I can, but there are just so many cases for Boise State. Penn State, SMU, both beatable teams coming up against Boise State team that is going to be very, very ready for this matchup and in one of the best positions they've been all year. So Boise State is going to advance to the semifinals. Semifinals. We're almost done, and this is definitely not the 30-minute video I said I wanted it to be. So here we go, full hour. All right. So semifinals, here we go. Texas versus Oregon, Boise State versus Georgia. We've already talked pretty much in depth about each of these teams, so this last section is going to be a little bit shorter than what I was talking about before. Texas, I think this is where their quarterback issues, some of that inconsistency that they've shown this season catches up to them. They're also going to be way more fatigued than Oregon at this point. And Oregon just came off of a tough game, but Texas now had to play 2 more games than what Oregon has had to play. And 3 games really that were much tougher than what Oregon had to play. I mean, I know Oregon had to really kind of pull out all the stops versus Penn State there, but it wasn't as tough as that. That Texas-Georgia game was a battle. And Oregon had the lead early, and Penn State came back, and Oregon had to kind of coast/finish to beat them. That game versus Georgia was much tougher for Texas, and the game versus Clemson won't be that bad, but it's an additional game. And then the game versus Arizona State is going to be tough. I don't think they're going to blow them out. I think it's going to be a battle. Maybe not the same level of battles Oregon versus Tennessee, but now you've got an additional game here and 3 very, very tough games versus Oregon, who's really only had to play 1 really tough game. So I think the fatigue will catch up with them. I just think Oregon is good. I think they're the best team in the country. Again, most complete team. I think they're a more complete team than Texas. And I think that Texas's offensive struggles at times, combined with the fatigue overall, is going to catch up to them, and Oregon will win this game. It could be close, somewhat of a 50-50 type of play. If Texas has the depth for it, which they do, they could potentially pull this one out. But again, I think those struggles where they wasn't as big of a factor versus Clemson and Arizona State, it will be a much bigger factor versus Oregon, and they will lose this game. Oregon will advance to the national championship. Now, Boise State versus Georgia. Man, this is a tough one to call. This is a tough one to call. If Georgia has Carson Beck, they beat Boise State easily. They definitely do. If they have Carson Beck, they beat Boise State easily. But I don't think they're going to have Carson Beck. And if they do have Carson Beck, it's going to be Carson Beck coming off of an injury. Or it's going to be a gunner who is a little bit of experience from that first game, maybe a little hyped up, a little pumped up, but also coming off of a season where he was not the starter and he's still going to be a little bit rusty. This is such a tough game to call. I think that this could come down to kind of a 50-50. There are a lot of things, there were so many things going for Boise State in that first game. They're now going against Boise State in this one. This is not going to be that home field advantage. I think there'll be more Georgia fans there than Boise State fans. Now, it's not like it's right there in Atlanta. This is going to be a drive. The Orange Bowl down in Miami is a trek. It's similar, especially when you start looking at like traffic, the amount of other cars on the highways. I mean, I've driven through Florida, especially that trip down south. It is brutal. I mean, drives that should only take an hour, a couple hours, are just 4 or 6 hours long. I mean, it's tough. So when you're talking about not necessarily actual as the bird flies distance, but the driving itself, it's about as far as getting down to the Fiesta Bowl for Boise State fans. So again, it's not like it's right next door, but it's the semifinals. It's Georgia, huge fan base. They are going to be excited. Chance at the national championship. They'll travel down. They will flock to that game. Boise State fans, I mean, obviously they'll have all those same things going for them as well, but as far as meaning of the game, but Boise State fans, again, we're going all out in the Fiesta Bowl. That is really how fans are thinking about this. I just don't see as many fans making the trip down to the Orange Bowl. I hope Bronco Nation shows up big. I think that they will probably sell out their ticket allotment, or get close to it. But this is after Christmas, and most Boise State fans use their money. They probably use their Christmas money on going to the Fiesta Bowl. That's a lot of people's Christmas money to go get down there. And you don't have the benefit. They are a national brand, and they're a large fan base, but not as large as Georgia. Some of those numbers will be lacking, and so I think that Boise State fans will represent well, but it's not going to be the same that it was in the Fiesta Bowl. I think there will be more Georgia fans there than Boise State fans, and there will be that element. Boise State fans also Boise State's going to come off of a huge win. There's going to be so much euphoria. It's going to be so hard to focus the team back. I mean, that's the thing about these playoff games, right? The playoffs are exciting. They're incredible. They add so much more meaning to the season. But they do, in an element, detract somewhat from the meaning of the winning of these games. Because winning the Fiesta Bowl in the first three, that was the biggest moment of the season. That was one of the biggest moments in school history. And it was in 2006, and you could argue the next two as well. It's definitely right up there. Top 3 moments in school history. But now you've won, and that's great. But now you got to go win another game. The Fiesta Bowl is not the finale. It's not necessarily the biggest moment. And I think that winning a playoff game and getting that and winning a Fiesta Bowl is still going to be huge. But you now have to refocus and get to the next game. And a little bit, just a little bit of the meaning of that win is taken away. Now, you also get to go to the semifinals. But it becomes a little bit more of a drag. It becomes a little bit more of kind of more of a regular season almost feel, where it's just, okay, on to the next one. We cannot live in the moment. It's on to the next game. Boise State they can beat Penn State. I'm not predicting they're going to blow them out. I am not predicting that. I want to make that clear. This is going to be a tough game. Boise State wins it, but it's going to be a tough game. And Boise State's going to be beat up, and they don't have the same depth that Georgia has. And Boise State also is going to have, as I said, trouble focusing. And Ashton Jeanty, the offensive line, they're going to be good like they have been all season, but you're not going to have that anger element. I think there's going to be another element that's going to turn Ashton Jeanty up to 110%. And that's scary because most of the season he's been playing banged up at like 80%. Back end of the year, he got closer to 90. I don't think we've really seen him at 100 since like the first half of the season. Now you're going to see him at 110%. He's going to be incredible. I think he's going to still play well versus Georgia, but I don't think he's going to be as good as he was in the Fiesta Bowl. Not just because Georgia's a tougher team defensively, but just because I think that he's going to be motivated. He always is, but like you've got additional factors that up that drive, and some of that will be fulfilled when he has the performance that we expect him to versus Penn State. And I think that Boise State's passing game, which has not been, extremely explosive all year, because that's not what the offense is built on. It's built on the running game and the passing game doing enough. I think that if Ashton Jeanty doesn't have the huge game the passing game will struggle, especially versus an SEC defense, to be that number one, to take over as the primary. There are questions still in this passing game, and not as many questions for me as for a lot of the fan base, and I have liked what I've seen out of Maddox Matson this year. But again, nobody is saying that this Boise State passing game is elite, that they can run this entire offense by themselves, because the offense isn't designed for that. It's designed for Ashton Jeanty, and the passing game, Maddox Matson is exactly what this passing game needs, which is to provide a reliable base to hand the ball off to Ashton Jeanty, to throw occasionally when he's needed to, and avoid turnovers and sacks. And he's done all of that. But if he's asked to then take up and be that explosive role, he can do that, but it's not necessarily the reason that he's the starting quarterback. It's because of the dependability aspect. And versus Georgia, he may need to be explosive. He may need to be the big play guy. And there's questions about whether or not Boise State's offense in the passing game, and it's not just Maddox Matson, wide receivers who drop passes all over the field, if they can do that. But now with Georgia, they also struggle in that drop passes. They lead the country in drop passes. At least they did in the SEC championship game. I mean, they're one of the worst teams in the country for drop passes, and they have quarterback questions. And the main point here is this game could go down to either team. I think that Georgia has more positives going for them in this matchup. I think Boise State can win this game. I think that they have a better chance against either a injured Carson Beck or a rusty, coming off of just one game's performance, gunner, than they would have against beating Georgia in the regular season. But I do think that Georgia is going to win this game. I think that just, again, the euphoria, a little bit more of a home field advantage for Georgia, everything else that they have going for them, I think that they'll probably end up sneaking out a win in this matchup. I think it's going to be close. I think Boise State's going to represent themselves well, and I would not be shocked, maybe a little bit, because it would mean so much to get to the national championship. But I think Boise State can win this game. I think they have the best chance of any of these teams of winning this game. Now, if they play Notre Dame, they can beat Notre Dame, for sure. They can certainly beat Notre Dame. I don't know if they can beat Georgia, and I think that Georgia, just the depth that they have, the fans, the number of fans that they will have in attendance, and just Georgia beat Notre Dame, that's what they do every day. I mean, that's no surprise for them. Boise State beating Penn State, that's huge, and there's so much more euphoria. They have a little bit of a more of a chance for some of what of a hangover element, trouble focusing and directing into the next game. And Spencer Danielson will have this team prepared, but it'll be tough. And so I think that, yes, you will see Georgia advance, and the national championship will be Oregon versus Georgia. Now, while Boise State might not be able to, they could, but I'm not predicting they will be able to exploit all of those weaknesses that I listed for Georgia. Oregon can. Oregon certainly can exploit all of those weaknesses that I listed for Georgia. I think that Oregon is going to win that game if they end up facing Georgia. I think that they will win that game by 3 touchdowns. Maybe 2, because Georgia will come in prepared. But Oregon is the superior team. They'll have played their entire gauntlet to get there. They have the offensive strength to really pick apart Georgia's defense. And they also have the defensive capability, not maybe the best, but enough of a defensive capability to stop what Georgia is able to present offensively, especially with issues at the quarterback position. So, final prediction, and I know we went all the way to an hour, and I do apologize for that, but the final prediction here is that Oregon is going to win the national championship. However, Boise State's going to have a good run. It's going to be a great playoffs for them. I cannot wait to preview the full game preview with Jake Posey from Master Football, so make sure you keep an eye out for that. And again, if you haven't picked up a Christmas present already, if you're looking for a way to commemorate this absolutely incredible season, make sure you guys check out Nico Sports and use Blameyer CFP for an opportunity to get $10 off of a fantastic commemoration. We are going to want to commemorate. We already want to commemorate this season because of everything, how incredible it's been. But we certainly want to commemorate this playoffs because I think Boise State is going to put themselves up in a very strong position and prove some media talking heads wrong, especially the fine bombs of the world. So thanks so much for watching. Again, let me know your thoughts. If you have not already, make sure you like, subscribe. And as always, go Big Blue!